Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Discover Your Happiness, a webinar hosted by Vital Hub Innovations Lab. I'm Rukshila Fernandapulle, your moderator this evening. Vital Hub is the software development hub of Canadian-based Vital Hub Corp. Being in Sri Lanka for nearly 15 years, Vital Hub strives to digitize innovative healthcare solutions to the North American, European, Middle Eastern, and Australian healthcare markets. This webinar is hosted in collaboration with SLASCOM, the National Chamber for the IT and BPM industry in Sri Lanka. Living with a positive mindset during these turbulent times while enjoying work from home is a challenge for many of us, especially for the IT and BPM professionals who work around the clock, spending much more screen time. Within the past 2 years, we've all faced many challenges. We have been seeing and hearing so much information on the importance of washing our hands, cleaning and sanitizing, and other methods of keeping this virus away from us. We've all been extremely cautious about our physical well-being. Maybe we take extra vitamins or precautions to stay physically healthy. That has definitely been beneficial to us. But is only that enough for us to stay healthy? Do we give the same more importance to taking care of our mind? Though we may not realize, our physical health is greatly impacted by our mental health. If we ask ourselves, what have we done to uplift our mental health? The good news is it's still not too late. Today, we have an expert with this on us. She will be providing guidance to IT and BPM professionals on how to discover your happiness amidst this new normal and how to overcome challenges of returning to the post-pandemic office environment. Let me introduce to you our speaker of the day. Pianjali D'Souza is a professor in clinical psychologist at the Faculty of Medicine, University of Colombo. She holds a BA in psychology, MA in applied psychology, and a PhD. And she's also a chartered psychologist. She has been a visiting lecturer at several universities, including the Sri Jayawardhanapura Sabaragamuwa Kelaniya and the Kotalawala Defence Academy. Being the founder president of the Sri Lanka Psychological Association, Professor Pianjali has also been a member of the National Mental Health Advisory Council. Before we begin this session today, a few notes to the house. This session is being recorded. Questions can be posted on Slido, which is an anonymous platform. The link will be shared with you on the chat now, or you can use the chat box. Questions will be answered at the end during the Q&A session, and your identity will not be revealed. If you wish to speak, let us know and we can unmute you individually. Professor Pianjali, this session is over to you.
Thank you, Rukshila. Now audible?
Yes, Pianjali, you are.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so Rukshila and Vital Hub and Dilan invited me to talk to all of you about mental health. And of course, whether there is a pandemic or no pandemic, mental health should be a prominent feature that we are concerned about if you want to live a happy, productive, effective life. Now, of course, the fact that this pandemic came into our life last year has pronounced the importance of mental health, because we do know that across the world, the impact of the pandemic had not been only felt on the physical body where the virus takes over, but also on the mental health of people who was not affected by the virus directly. Because of that, we have seen that rates of depression have increased worldwide, rates of anxiety, relationship breakdowns have multiplied. Violence against women, violence against children have increased. In fact, violence against women is called the shadow pandemic because it's so increased now. Then, of course, there is suicide rates have increased. So we see that this pandemic has brought on another non-communicable disease, which is mental health. But pandemic or no pandemic, we all have gone through challenges in life where we would have liked to have coped with these challenges in a much more mature and a much more effective way. So today, my talk to you is not necessarily on the pandemic itself, of course, it will be based on that. But whatever I do talk to you is for your life, because one fine day this pandemic will pass and we'll get on with our life. But yet, we do need to know how we could be, mentally healthy and having good sense of well-being. So what I plan to do is from 4 to say about 5:15. I'll be talking to you firstly about the indicators of an effective mind. Then I'll be giving you a whole toolbox of strategies on how to have an effective, well-functioning, healthy mind. And then in the last 15 minutes, we will be taking your questions. That's the kind of a structure that I have in mind for you. So, Rukshila, all audible, isn't it? Just want to check with you.
Yes, Professor Pianchula, it's audible.
Okay. So before we really go on to really learning how to be effective, have an effective, well-functioning, strong mind, let us really look at what are the indicators of such a mind. Because, we might all think that we are highly functional. Most dysfunctional people think that they're highly functional. And the most functional people might think they're dysfunctional. So we really need to know the benchmark that we are kind of aiming for. It's like a budget for a company or a pass mark at an examination. We need to know what is there so that we can compare ourselves. So I'm going to give you 5 of the more common indicators of mental health or mental well-being so that you could compare yourself to this list. But having kept in mind that this is actually a continuum. So you might be not doing too well mentally today or this month or this year, but you may have done better last year. You may do better next year. So just as physical health, mental health is fluctuating. But generally, we have seen that as our mind becomes better functioning and has more indicators of mental health over the years, it just grows into a momentum. So if we have done a lot of self-development work in our 20s, usually the 30s, 40s are better than if you hadn't done much work of self-development in your 20s. That's how it goes. But it's never too late. In fact, one of my colleagues, a 70-year-old professor, when I wished her for her birthday a few weeks ago, she said, Pianchali, now at this age, at this milestone birthday, I realized it's really pointless trying to change others. I need to change myself. It's a late realization. I hope it's not too late. This is a 70-year-old talking. And now she's regretting that she didn't do this kind of self-development work when she was younger, for which she had done it. She would have had a much more rich life and a fulfilling life. So what is this rich life and what is the fulfilling life and what are the indicators of such a life? These are the first question, first segment of my talk to you. The first is, if you are mentally healthy, if you have such a mental well-being, you will actually would enjoy life in a greater proportion in a day. Now, it doesn't mean that you'll be thrilled to bits morning, day, and night. That's not possible because we are bombarded with unwholesome, defiled emotions like anger, jealousy, irritability, restlessness, sadness. Those are not emotions that we like, isn't it? Because it kind of dampens us. You would prefer moods like joy or calmness or peacefulness. Now, if in a day, your day is percentage-wise more of calmness, contentment, peacefulness, happiness, joy, sense of contentment, then we would say your mental health is good. So when you say enjoyment of life, you're not talking about partying Friday night or Saturday night, and that's also like it's a hedonistic enjoyment. It's not what we're talking about, because we do know people that who party like nothing are very unhappy people. One of my friends who had a history of partying for several years. Recently, I met her after many years, and now we are both in our late 40s and 50s, and she was saying, Pianchali, I just can't remember the day I was happy. but I have everything. I mean, I have a fantastic house in the middle of Colombo, this beautiful cars, lovely children who are high achievers and lots of money, but I can't remember when I was happy. That's a significant comment. So here when we're talking about enjoyment, we're not talking about transitory enjoyments or a purchase or a party, but it's more like inside feelings of contentment, peaceful. So if you have more of that in a given day, you would be considered mentally healthy. The second indicator of mental health is your ability to cope with life challenges. Now, we will all undoubtedly go through life challenges, and many of us have gone through. I mean, either a passing away or death of a parent, a partner, a child, a valued friend, a sibling who was very dear to our heart, or the diagnosis of a physical illness of yourself or somebody who's very close to you, or a chronic disability, a significant illness of a child, a great financial loss, or being exposed to a natural disaster. It can be anything, or a relationship breakdown, a divorce, separation. So it can be anything, isn't it? So we have almost all of us would have gone through now, and if you haven't, you undoubtedly will. Because that's life, isn't it? How have you coped with these challenges? Have you coped with it in a dignified, matured way, where yes, you have felt very low, you have felt quite difficult, life is tough, but you were able to get on with life and conclude most of your daily responsibilities despite what happened to you? Or when these challenges came to you, did you just kind of break away, just break down totally? You don't know where you are. You're just horning at every Tom, Dick, and Harry on the road. You're just having temper tantrums left, right, and center. You're crying so loudly. You're just wallowing yourself in the soil on the earth. You just don't know where you're going. You're going on massive shopping sprees and burning your credit card. All sorts of very unhealthy behavior strategies are emanating from you. If you're there, you need to work on your mental health. And of course, emotional stability in the face of these challenges. Is your emotional stability like a very, very dysfunctional electrocardiogram reading, an ECG reading, which goes like this, or it's like a dead one? Or is it like your emotional stability is good despite difficult things? Sometimes we meet people who talk to us, who are kind to us, who smile with us, but when we get to know them a little bit, they tell us the most difficult of life stories, like a sick and a dying child at home, but they're emotionally very with it. Then we hear of somebody who's all over the place, criticizing everybody, having, emotional outbursts. And then the biggest problem in his or her life at the moment was that the domestic had gone for New Year holidays and hasn't come back after 1 week. And that's the biggest problem in that person's life. And they're emotional wreck. So how is your emotional stability? Is it holding well? Then you are mentally healthy. Then have you fulfilled most of your life goals and potentials, or are you on the way to do that? Now, all of us as a child would have had a goal, isn't it? And of course, these goals would change. Like, for example, I may have had a goal. I mean, my goal as a child was to become an astronaut because it's already fun. But by the time I realized that astronauts spend lots of months away on some lonely shuttle eating tablets rather than chocolates, I just quickly gave up that habit of that interest. But then we have new goals. So now, have you realized some of those goals, or are you working towards it? Or have you switched goals and working towards new ones? If you're working towards your goals or realize some of them, at least at whatever age, of course, if you're in your 50s, 60s, you would have realized some of them. If you're in your 20s, you're still working for it. That doesn't matter. That is an indicator of mental health. And why is it an indicator of mental health? Because when you have a goal, you need to have patience, you need to have tolerance, you need to have grit, you need to have staying power, and you also need to have letting go of things that is not serving you in realizing your goal. And all of these are indicators of mental health, you see. On the other hand, there are people whose life goals are like last year they want to become an accountant, this year they want to become a lawyer, next year they want to become an architect, fourth year they want to ordain themselves, and you don't know where they're coming from. They also don't know where they're coming from. If that is the case, that grit, persistence, tolerance, patience, letting go, all of those are very less developed, which are not good indicators of mental health. Another very key indicator of mental health is the amount of connections you have. We do know that, especially in the pandemic, we realized that we actually were connected to a machine. And you all in the IT industry are more so than somebody like me who's an academic, who we go out, we do live lectures, we connect individually with patients. Whatever industry we come from, whether pandemic or not, we live with humans. Whether it's our family, our extended family, our workplace, our neighborhood, our charitable works we do, we need people because we cannot live alone. We're not hermits. And hermits also might get sick and they need to be brought to the hospital. So how are your relationships? Are they very superficial? As somebody told me, one of my friends said, I rely only on myself. I do not have friends. And there was great pride in saying that. And I was really surprised. And then as some time back, in the late night, she calls me crying because her husband was admitted to hospital with some disease. And she didn't call him because I was a psychologist, but she wanted to talk to a friend. And I was really not her friend, but she thought she talked to me. And I realized that though she took great pride in saying, I rely on myself, she didn't have anybody to talk to and share her sadness about her husband's hospital admission with anybody. She didn't have anybody in her life. There are others who have friends to party with, or they have 5,000 Facebook contacts or X number of Instagram followers, but somebody close to your heart, somebody who will cover your back, who would advise you wisely, kindly, firmly for your own benefit, from whom you can borrow money if you are in great difficulty. If you had an accident, whom you can call and they'll come and help you out. If you need to go to hospital and you can't get yourself up from bed, somebody will take you. Do you have people like that? Because you see, making that kind of quality connection means you need to be able to tolerate a person's weaknesses. Or are you a person who just dumps people the moment they don't return your text message or don't return your call? You get cheesed off and that's the end of the story. If so, you have very poor connections, and poor connections is an indicator of lower mental health. So these are some of the indicators that you can benchmark yourself to see where you stand. Now, my next and the final part of the longer version of my talk to you today is about how you can uplift your mental functioning so that you can be the best version of yourself in this life. You live very short life, 75, 85 years. Some of us may have done half of that. And, and research, older people have said that they really regret that they haven't live their life the way it should have been lived when they were younger. And when you're older, you can't do much changes, isn't it? Because life is minimal, physically you're not as weak. So this is the greatest time to make changes so that your next years in life will be so fulfilling. So I'm going to give you a whole range of strategies. Rukshila and Dilan wanted me to emphasize about the pandemic, and I told them, yes, it will be emphasized, but I'll be also talking to you about your entire life journey as opposed to the pandemic. So whatever strategies you like, choose it from it's a toolkit I'm offering you, like a box of chocolates, somebody gives you and you choose what chocolate looks nice, but you can also choose all the chocolates as well. And Rukshila is recording it. We'll make the recording available for you so that you can listen to it over and over again like most people do, so that this information is with you. So the first and the most key strategy for mental well-being, pandemic or no pandemic, is our perspective on life. Now, most people's perspective on life is such that everything has to go nicely for me. That's it. Nothing can go wrong for me. Things just have to have it on an upward mobility. It's like a staircase that is going up. You can't skip a stair. Even if you skip, it's only on the upward growth. You can't go down, you just go up, up and up. But life isn't like that, isn't it? I mean, it sounds ridiculous even wanting something like this. And when I'm telling this to you, you might say, yeah, it doesn't happen like that, but you want it to happen to you. Now, if you are of that view, that life is only an upward mobility, nothing adverse should happen to me. It can happen to my next door neighbor, it could happen to my dog, but not to me and my immediate ones. That is an extremely convoluted sense of the world. And the more you stick to that misunderstanding of the world's nature, you're going to be unhappy. Now, let me give you a little story to rub the point across. There was in an ancient kingdom a king who was conceited and disliked by his ministers and his people. He heard of a ring that was owned by another king of another kingdom, and he wanted it. And the egoistic man he was, he had ordered his army general to get it for him, hook or by crook. So general brought it for him packaged in a little box. And his king thought, oh, fantastic, what I want must be full of diamonds, sapphires, and emeralds and rubies. And he opened it, and there was nothing of that sort. It's just a bronze ring. He was really cheesed off. He was about to throw it away, and as he was throwing it, he saw in the inside of the ring, there was a carving that said, "This too will pass. This too will pass." So that was a bit strange. And so he didn't throw it, he put it into his ring, his finger. There are lots of other rings also. And he forgot about it. And the years went by, and his people were getting really sick of this chap because he was so conceited, doing nothing much for the country. They asked another king to take over and put this chap in prison. So now he's sitting in prison, devoid of all his regal attire and his rings, but this bronze ring was there because nobody bothered to take it off him. So he was playing absent-mindedly with this ring, and he took it out and he saw this little saying. It said, "This too will pass." He thought, oh, that's interesting. For a moment, he kind of, like a little light bulb. Then he said, well, I was a king, it passed. I'm in prison. This will also pass. That's the way. In Sinhalese, we say dharmataya. Or in Pali or Sanskrit, it's the truth of the world. It's the truth of the world. So anyway, some time went past and he was in prison, and his ministers now realized the new king was worse than the old one. So they felt sorry for this chap and came and told him, "Oh, king, the new one that replaced you was far worse. We feel sorry for you. We will allow you to escape from the prison. You go to a village, do some, kind of farming thing, and stay there as a free man." He agreed to it. So now he's in a village doing his farming work, very tedious because he was a king after all, not knowing how to do farming right now, but freedom is essential. So he was there. He kept his ring handy. On and off, he looked at it and said, "This too will pass." And now this message and the value of this ring, why this ring is so valuable, struck him more and more. And he thought, well, I was a king, it went. I was in prison, that also passed. Then I'm now doing farming work, this has to also pass. Anyway, with that knowledge that this is the way the world runs, he became a much more human version of himself. He transformed. Anyway, his ministers came back and said, "Oh, king, we are quite sick of the second one. We want to get rid of the second king. Could you kindly be our king again?" He said, "Fine." So at the time of his coronation, he said, "I don't want any other rings. I only want this one." And on the time that he was being crowned, he looked at this ring and it said, "This too will pass." And he realized that this second time as king will also pass away. Now, our life, if we have that perspective, that this will also pass. There's on your left side of your screen, on the bottom, this is in Sinhalese, it said, if you do not change your view or the angle or the perspective that you have of life, you will be permanently having a prescription for unhappiness. So your perspective in life. Now, if you look at the pandemic, right? We know there were two significant pandemics in the world in known history. In the 1300s, there was a Black Death. 100 years ago was a Spanish flu, 1918 to 1919. During the Spanish flu, I have put a little notice that was done in the Spanish flu on the right bottom corner. You can see it's highlighted, Thursday, November 7, 1918. It says, "Notice is hereby given that in order to prevent the spread of the Spanish influenza All schools, public and private churches, theaters, movie picture halls, pools, room, and other places of amusement and lodge meetings are to be closed until further notice. Signed 19th October 1918, all that. So during that time, other than this Black Death, which killed 50 million people all over the world, by the way, there was also the World War I, World War II, apparently a diphtheria outbreak, as well as the Great Economic Depression was around the corner. So lots of significant issues were happening in the world, not as it's worse than what it was. We are far better with the COVID-19. Not that we would want to embrace COVID-19, but I'm just trying to put it into perspective for you. Are you able to bring that perspective to your life? That life is spotted with challenges. That is the truth. You have to accept it and understand that, just as the king did. And if you are of that perspective, that when challenges come to you, if you can tell yourself that this too is a part of life. Just as when happy things come, this too is also part of life, but these things will change. So first strategy of mental well-being, pandemic or no pandemic, is this can also happen. It only can happen to humans, hence it can happen to me. The second strategy of happiness or mental well-being, I like to call the word mental well-being because it's much more holistic than just saying happiness. New research, particularly during this pandemic time, I was reading a paper actually after I had a discussion with Rukshila and Dilan, a new research data that's coming out on happiness and mental well-being. This document says there are 3 ways in which humans can become happy. 3 ways. The first is a very hedonistic way of becoming happy, which is just joy and regular happiness. And, those are important. Like, for example, I love having iced coffee. So, it's a hedonistic one, right? It's going to take me, okay, I can drink my big glass for 1 hour, but that's it. It's finished. It's very sense pleasure based. You can party Friday night, Saturday night, but the next day you're like really groggy and you're not quite there. But the party time is okay. But after that time, also after a few hours, you're also like sick of it, isn't it? You can go shopping and after some time you're like exhausted. So those are very hedonistic, short-lived bouts of happiness that we give ourselves and is essential for us. That's the first and the more superficial, worldly types of happiness that you can get. And you can, of course, certainly indulge in them if you're feeling low. So having that nice cup of tea or coffee or meeting with a friend, watching a movie, do those when you're unhappy. However, if you want more long-standing, deeper sense of happiness growing from you, just as I've spoken to you in this slide, under enjoyment of life, you want those kinds of feelings like peace and contentment and sense of well-being and calmness. This hedonistic joys and regular happiness is insufficient. You need to do more work on yourself. And what is this more work? It is living a meaningful life. And you might say, well, I live a meaningful life. I work hard at my job and I look after my spouse and my dog and my children, and I buy myself a vehicle and I put my children to good universities and send them to tuition. And, yeah, it's a meaningful life. But do you feel content doing that? When we talk about meaningful life, we are thinking of a life that is beyond your immediate self-concerns. What is of immediate self-concern is about preserving myself and my family. That's what most people do. When we talk about meaningful life, we are going on the possibility of stepping away from me, myself, and I. Doing something beyond that where you might not get recognition. Now, a lot of people might do things like, now, for example, a person might build something and they put a plaque built by Pianjali D'Souza on September 29, 2021. Now, that is not, it is me. You have done a meaningful public work, but you can go and put your name there. The meaningfulness of it reduces because of that. Why? Your ego is now embedded in that activity you have done. But then we see people who do much meaningful things without trying to get glory out of it also. and which is purely for somebody else. Now, for example, I'll tell you a story. One of my colleagues, I actually got permission from to tell his name, Dr. Sajid Edirisinghe. He's one of my colleagues at the anatomy department at Sri Jayawardenepura Medical Faculty. I saw on his Facebook page, he had put about cleaning. He and his friends on at least 1 or 2 weekends a month, they go to various beaches in Sri Lanka, whether it's Kalmune or Pasikuda, Kokilai or Mount Lavinia, and they clean the beach of plastic. Then I have seen photos on his Facebook on tree planting with the Air Force, just buying tree planting and together with the Air Force. So I asked Sajid, like, what made you interested? He said, madam, I have an option of how I'm going to do my weekends. I can either get together with friends and party, or I could do something for our country, to the world. And I'm very passionate about ocean conservation and climate change and reducing carbon footprint. So it's tough cleaning beaches of plastic because it gets hot, it's salty, wind and water going on to you. And once you clean the beach from the plastic, another bunch of plastic gets swept up and we clean it again. But this sense of internal contentment of doing something like this, it's amazing. It outweighs any partying we do. Similarly for the tree planting. So would you do something like that? Would you, for example, volunteer at an elders home near your house, where you go and visit the elders whose own children don't come to visit them, and you do that every Sunday, maybe bring a child along? Or would you be having a domestic helper's child who's back in the village, where you're funding that person, just as you would do for your own child, for that person's education? Or you might be knowing a lady down the road who's of a poor socioeconomic strata, where you fund their entire grocery bill. Now, those are meaningful things that we could incorporate, which jacks up our sense of well-being. A third and a very important dimension of happiness or contributor is what we call psychologically enriching experience. And I want to talk to you about this in the post-pandemic work-life experience. Now, what are these psychologically enriching experiences? You might think, oh, it's going to Kenya on a vacation, like a safari, or going to Egypt to see the pyramids finally, or going to Peru to see the Maya civilizations, because they are enriching. No, we're not talking about that. Here, we are talking about psychologically enriching experiences as experiences given by challenging life situations. Research have shown, particularly research done during this COVID time, that those people who went through challenging life situations, those people means all of us, right? Me included, Dylan, Rukshila, all of you, went through a challenge. And for a long time, right? 16 months. It broadens our perspective in life if you allow it to be broadened. Some people, I do some clinical work as well, and I had a client, a patient, who was so angry at the pandemic. And she's like, this pandemic shouldn't happen, and why did it happen? And this is terrible, and really angry at the virus, the COVID-19 virus. But if you don't go to those levels, but look at the life as this is what life too is about, that can actually increase your well-being. And in fact, it has consequences for your back to work life, back to work post-COVID, because all of us have worked for 16 months, mostly from home, except say significant healthcare workers and essential service workers who've been going to work, so many long hours wearing PPEs, but most of us have been in the comfort of home. We don't know how your work life at home would be, but for some people it will be comfortable. And now you're asked to come back, at least on a flexi schedule, back to work. And you might think, oh, I have got now get adjusted again. And that's another challenge. But what research has shown is in those countries, like in the US and the UK, where people are going back to work, they have found that the reshift from the comfort of staying at home and the family, if it's a comfort, for some people it was not a comfort and they're waiting to come back to work, and that's fine. Coming back and adjusting back to a commute, to being with difficult employees and colleagues and annoying ones and all that, and having to have physical meetings is also a challenge. But these challenges can give you life skills and life perspectives, broaden your horizons about what life is, which in turn can increase your well-being. So research, I was reading an article, I think either on The Economist or The Guardian, and they found people who are going back to work in Wall Street. You know, we've seen photos of Wall Street, or you've been going there wearing full suit, you know, morning, day and night. And there are people who are now going back, the same people who used to wear full suit in 2019 or 2020, early 2020, wearing jeans and shirt and t-shirt, and life has changed. And there are so many people who decided, no, I don't want to go back to this desk job. I want to start my own business. And that is significant, apparently, huge percentage in Western countries where people can take this risk of starting their own businesses. People are going there. They don't want to come back to their old job. Then there is an increase in what we call the silver hair divorces. Silver hair is the 50s, right? Because that's when you get your gray hairs. And anyway, silver hair divorces are divorces of people in their 50s after, say, 20, 25 years of marriage. People realize they don't get on well with their partners. They have grown apart as people, and divorce is usually high in that bracket. It's increased by about, I think, 20% in Western countries during this pandemic. Because why? People had time to, because they stayed with their spouses at home, and they realized, this is what I want for the rest of my life. You know, I don't have anything common with this person anymore. They may be a lovely person, but I can't in this stage stay in the next 25 to 30 years of my life with this person, and people are going into changes in their life situations. So all of these are challenges that we're facing, whether it's going back to work or your relationship, whatever, or somebody close to you had got the COVID or passed away from the COVID. If you can look at these life challenges as openings, the larger context of what life is, it can increase your well-being. So it's up to you how you take it. In fact, the third strategy is a great opportunity for us to consider and to really understand what life is, to really contemplate on it. That reminds me, like a few weeks ago, when we were locked down, we were still teaching, and our final year, second year, third year, fourth year medical students were doing their clinics, and we were going to hospitals in double masking and whatnot. And so we had about 35 students in our psychiatry ward, and about at a given time, there were about 7 of them that got positive, tested positive for COVID. So 2 people were in home quarantine, I think, or they were suspect COVID. One was at the hostel in isolation. One was at hospital, NHSL, National Hospital, and the other one was in the intermediate care center in Rajagiri. So my colleagues wanted me to talk to them on Zoom to see how they're doing, because I'm a psychologist and all that. So I was really amazed. And these are 26-year-old young people. And these were finally medical students, done 4 years of extremely grueling medical training, where they just get up early morning, and they have lectures even at 12 o'clock in the night. You know, some of the consultants finish their surgeries in the theaters, and they come and teach, and they all go home really late. And they just got diagnosed with COVID, which means they had to take 2 weeks of their clinical learning schedule, which means that they might miss an exam with their batch. So they kind of go back by 2 weeks. So I asked the students, the 7 ones I connect on Zoom, how are things? And except one, 6 of them, story was, I'll just give one person. This young man said, you know, madam, I'm currently connecting to this talk with you from Rajagiri Intermediate Care Center, which is the previous Ayurveda hospital near McDonald's. And she said, you know, up to the time I was diagnosed with COVID, I had 4 months of grueling clinical training. I had done a clinical medicine appointment of 2 months, pediatrics appointment of 2 months. I don't know whether I was getting up, walking, sitting, going backwards, going forwards. I just like on an automatic schedule, because so many patients to see, so many case reports, so many ward rounds. That's part of medical training. And then I got diagnosed with this, and I came to Rajagiri, and initially I was a bit concerned, but these 2 weeks that I had was the best thing that happened to me, because it made me think that I don't want to run like this. Run, 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 run. Achieve, 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 achieve. What for? I haven't even talked to my siblings like my father and mother decent time for months. I haven't spoken to my girlfriend or met her for weeks. And then you see there are diseases coming to us, and what is enjoyment in life? And then he said, I'm so thankful for Sri Lanka. I'm so thankful for the poor taxpayers of our country, who, because of whom I have got breakfast, lunch, dinner, tea, biscuits at the Rajagiriya Center. I'm so thankful for everything. But this is a really mature person. How many of us can we think like that? How many of us would look at this COVID experience as an opportunity to reflect on the way we had lived our life? Is it worth it? Is it worth the way we had conducted our interpersonal relationships so far? Is it time to change those things? Is it worth it to pursue and be so hectic? Is it worth it to just drink and smoke and do drugs and party? Is it worth it to do to our body? This is an opportunity for you to consider, and as you go back into post-COVID life, to make some really significant changes in your life, to have used this opportunity to be a better version of yourself, then that's a better life lived. The fourth strategy, and I think this is one of the most significant strategies I want to talk to you about, is a strategy per se, because I think these ones were like more generous strategy, but this is a strategy, clear cut, is living in the present moment. Now, living in the present moment is, are you living in the here and the now? Your body certainly must be, because you're sitting somewhere, isn't it? But is your mind with you? For many of us, 70% or even 90% of the time, our body is somewhere, mind is somewhere else. Mind is usually in the past, the dead past, and the unknown future. Then you also might tweak up this past, the future with some fantasy thrown in. Like, for example, oh, I'm going to come up with an invention that will kind of break the IT technology in the world, and I'll get the Nobel Prize. I shall go to Norway, and I'm the first Sri Lankan ever to get a Nobel Prize, and how proud my village community would be. That kind of stuff. And you're nowhere there, but you can fantasize about a future occurrence, and we live in those things. Now, we find that individuals who live in the past, who live in the future, just living there in this headspace, is not very mentally healthy. And the reason is, when we live in those kind of segments, as opposed to what's happening now, firstly, we are bombarded by a whole bunch of unwholesome emotions, like anxiety. Anxiety is a sickness of the current generation, because anxiety is tied up with dreaming about the future now. Depression is thinking about the past. Oh, I should have done that. I shouldn't have done that. Guilt, everything comes from living in the past. Similarly, anger, frustration, all of these unwholesome emotions that drag you down seeps into the mind when you're not living in the present moment. However, when you live in the present moment, if I were to give you an analogy, it's like a well-thatched roof of a house. If you have a house which is well-thatched, nice tiling, sheets, whatever cyclone comes, you're going to be safe inside that house. But if your roof has a little holes here and there, and the iticola and stuff, when the rains come, forget about a cyclone, even a minor rain, you'll have to be running around trying to put pots and pans to hold that water in. Cyclone, you're finished. Our mind has to be also well-thatched, like a well-thatched roof of a house, so that emotions will drag you down, like unhappiness, anger, frustration, anxiety, won't plummet you. And how do you thatch your roof well? It's living in the present. How do you live in the present? You keep your mind on the activity you are doing. So, for example, you get up in the morning, as you keep your foot down from the bed, you are aware that your foot is touching the ground. How many people don't know their foot is touching the ground because they're thinking of the breakfast menu? Then while they're walking to the washroom, which they usually do, they do it on automatic pilot mode whilst thinking of the 9 o'clock meeting and how they're going to tell off their colleague there. And then they go and bump themselves on the wall rather than going to the washroom. However, a person who's living in the present moment, on the other hand, would be somebody whilst walking is aware of the walking process, because that's the only reality he or she has at that moment. Then he or she sees the mind is now wandering to what shall I have for breakfast, shall I have toast, shall I have moongatter, or the noodles from last night. Now the thinking mind has got activated. The moment the person realizes the mind has got activated and moving away from her action at that time, they bring the mind back to the action. So basically, living in the present moment involves keeping your mind with what your body is doing. Easier said than done, because for many of us, we're used to multitasking, isn't it? We are talking to our child while texting some WhatsApp message to some random friend while the TV is on. So we think we are doing 3 things. Neurologically, the human brain cannot do 3 things. It cannot do 1 thing. So if you're going to do these 3 things together, you're basically doing 33% of 1 thing only. That's why we make so many mistakes when we multitask. In fact, we found through research that people who live in the present moment are far more creative, better problem solvers, and better decision makers than people who do not. That is why companies like Google and Apple have specialized courses on simply being in the present moment as a webinar, of course, for their tech staff, so that their creativity can be unleashed. In fact, even in Sri Lanka, certain companies just want courses on how to live in the present moment. So then you might ask me, well, if I live in the present moment, how would I plan? As a company, we need to do projections, we have a business plan, we have a marketing plan, we need to have budget meetings. For that, I need to also reflect on the past. Am I not supposed to do that? No, certainly. What we are sitting here is certainly do your budget plans, you do your business plans, you have to reflect on the past practices so that you can project for the future. So about at that level, we need to decide what we're going to work, where to work tomorrow, or what food to cook, or whether to put the laundry or not. Those kind of things we do, we plan. Here, what we're referring to is this ruminating, going beyond what is required. So, for example, thinking of what am I going to wear tomorrow? What should I cook for breakfast, lunch, and dinner? You do that, you decide, and you let it be. But what do we usually do? We think of what we're going to do tomorrow, and then we have little stories coming out of it as well. Or shall I wear that dress or this dress? Now, I wore this dress last week. So if I wear it again, even though it's an online meeting, that person in this department might think I had not been dresses. Now you have started that rumination business. It is that which you have to stop. I have a little picture for you on the top right-hand corner of 2 people. The first picture is somebody who is not living in the present moment. The second one is somebody on a board who is like the person who's living in the present moment. When you are living in the present moment, you are like the person on the board because you have control over your life. The vicissitudes of life, which are like the waves of an ocean, will come your way as it would, as life is, but you have some protection because you're in a boat. You have a pedal. You can decide which way you want to pedal and which island you want to go and land yourself in. But if, on the other hand, you're the person who's enmeshed in fantasizing, living in the past, living in the future, multitasking, then your mind is going to be bombarded with thoughts, like the waves of an ocean and the man who is trying to swim the waves of the ocean to get to the island. He'll drown and dead or be eaten by a shark. So therefore, living in the present is a strategy that will strengthen your mind, where you practice keeping your mind on the activity you're doing. So if you're cutting carrots for tonight's dinner, you cut carrots with full awareness you're doing that. And as you see, your mind will wander away 102 times until the carrots are all cut. That's the nature of the human mind, to run away from the activity it's doing. Every time you realize it has run away, all what you have to do is gently bring your mind back to cutting the carrots. That's all. Keep on doing that. As you keep on doing that, you will realize over time, it won't happen tomorrow, it won't happen next week, but it will happen after a few weeks. You will realize that your tendency to get swayed by your thoughts and your emotions is lessened. So you have now transferred yourself from the man who is swimming in the ocean to the man who is having a boat and paddling in the ocean. So you're not in the vicissitudes or you're not in the grips of your emotions, rather you are mastering your emotions. In fact, mindfulness or living in the present moment is a psychological technique that we teach across for people like yourselves as well as clinically unwell populations. And you can learn a lot about it by typing in mindfulness or present moment awareness on Google. There are lots of apps, free apps and paid for apps internationally that you can download to incorporate this practice as a part of your life. So like brushing your teeth, living in the present moment should be a part of your life if you really want to grow psychologically. The fifth strategy that I have in mind for you is counting your blessings. Now, the tendency of a human mind, unless you are hugely a positive thinker, is to think about what you don't have, isn't it? But if you think about ourselves, we have a lot going for us. We have a lot going for us. I have a friend of mine who I was speaking to some days ago, and she was saying, Priyanka, life is so lonely. Her relationship isn't working out, and she was really lonely. But then, Pianjali, I have nothing to complain. I have a comfortable bed to sleep on. I have good food, not just food, good food on my table. I have friends like yourself. I have a fantastic vehicle. I have a superb job where I serve people which pay me well and a lovely bunch of colleagues. I have all of those things. I have nothing to complain. But that's a fantastic perspective, but how many of us think like that? Sometimes you get up in the morning thinking, now what shall I be unhappy about? What is it that I don't have? That's the way people do it, right? So learning to count your blessings, you have to sometimes learn it because our mind can't mobile phones. So many people in the world don't have it. We have a good power supply. Some people don't even have a light bulb at their house, no electricity supply. We have food and water. We have a job. So many people have lost theirs. We have shelter. So many things. But our mind looks, what do I don't have? Now I have to go back to work after this COVID thing. It's only 2 days a week, but still. The fact that you have a job, that you have a salary, that you're not laid off, so counting blessings, because you see, when you count blessings, what happens to you is your mood gets up. You feel happy. You're not this grumpy old person. And when the mood goes up, you generate even more positive thoughts. Haven't you noticed that when you're happy, you look at the world in a much better light than when you're unhappy? How would you learn this? How would you include the strategy of counting your blessings into your life? One way is through a gratitude journal, which you can keep every night. So before you go to sleep, either through journaling is really good. It's like a little book. I do journaling myself since recently, where you write things. So what are the things I was happy for today? And you write that entire list. And it doesn't have to be huge things, because huge good things don't happen every day. Every day you don't get married if your marriage is a happy one. Every day your child isn't pass the Shishat exam, because it happens only once in a lifetime for a situation. You don't get a salary increment every day, though you may wish to. You don't get a promotion every day. But so many things that happens every day, such as your friend who called you and had a chat with you for 1 hour. It's fantastic to have such a friend in your life. The fact that you have enough money to go and buy that lamprey that you always loved from the place that you always love to eat from, and that you could enjoy it. The fact that you could put up your feet and have this fantastic cup of tea all by yourself, listening to the rain outside. It's a blessing. The fact that you are in an organization that offer or a community that offers these kinds of webinars free for your own development is a blessing. So what you actually do is every night you actively seek out things that actually added some joy, some happiness, some benefit to your mental health, and you write it down. Or you think about it, but writing is much more powerful because it kind of, you write it means you commit to it. As you keep on doing gratitude journaling for weeks, you will see that your mind shifts. You go to sleep better because you're going to sleep with a positive perspective of appreciation. Then you get up in the next morning with a positive set of mind. That's how you start retraining your mind. The sixth strategy of mental health is altruism, being good and kind to others. Now, I spoke about this in many occasions in my webinar of being there for people, of being self-centered versus non-self-centered. Because we might think, I look after my spouse. I'm sending my children to the best universities in the world. They get all the lovely things they want to. I give my domestic helpers and my drivers the best of things. But that is your duties and responsibilities within your purview. Certainly, there are people who don't even do those things. But usually, those are done because your family, your children, your spouse, your domestics, your car, house, and maybe your immediate neighbors are extensions of yourself, isn't it? It's me, myself, and I. So really, doing things for them, though it can give momentary joy, it would, doesn't give deep sense of upliftment. What we have seen as giving deep sense of upliftment is when you do for communities and peoples and projects that doesn't venerate you, that doesn't put up your ego, and that which where you give yourself fully. Now, came to mind this story. I was listening to a Buddhist sermon by this monk who was talking about this concept, and he said that he was building this chaitya, a pagoda, and there are lots of people putting in significant amount of money and paying by sending checks and whatnot. So one day he had got 50 rupees in an envelope as a donation to this temple. The smallest, I think we don't even have 50 rupee notes now. No, the highest is 100. So during the time, there's a 50 rupee note. Even then, it was nothing much. So. And there was a little, like a tundua with somebody's name and telephone number and address. So he was curious. So he called, and this woman answered the phone, and the monk had said, labuna me parityage egana katha karana call kare. Then this woman's story was she was a lottery seller. So each lottery she sells, she gets 1 rupee profit. She lives by herself, lives off her lotteries. Her children have left her, lives in a hut far away. So she had told this monk, I've always wanted to do something to build a temple. And I'm so happy that I was able to send this 50 rupees. So for her to collect that 50 rupees, she had to sell 50 tickets. To collect it was a big thing for her. So I'm talking about things like that. It's not about the money that you spend. It's about how much of yourself are you extending, challenging yourself, going beyond your boundaries to do something for somebody. Another example would be you're going through a painful life situation when a friend calls to talk about her painful life situation. Are you willing to keep aside your situation and listen to your friend and offer her some wise counsel? Or are you going to tell off your friend to say how worse your life is? Or worse still, tell your friend your problems. And that poor woman is now thinking what happened to her when she called to tell you about her problems. So that's what happens. So altruism is where you go beyond your gains, your immediate circles, and give to others. And we saw that happening quite a bit during pandemic times. So many people collecting badumalu, going after certain people, building houses, giving, looking into the garbage collectors, the 3-wheelers they had gone up and down, then looking into how are they managed because they had no jobs. And so just going beyond that. is an extremely powerful strategy of really uplifting your mental health. And again, coming to connected to altruism is being connected. I spoke to you about this as well as a mental health indicator is about the importance of being connected. And I think the IT industry, particularly because your connection is mostly with the machine, you have to make a concentrated effort for this. Having said that, it doesn't mean that you need to party every night, because amongst us, there are people who are introverts and extroverts. For example, I'm an introvert. I think I'm more to the introverts. People might think I'm extroverted, but I'm not. I like to be by myself quite a lot. I like to contemplate, to reflect, to self-develop. I can't really meet around with friends, meet people a lot. It's a little too much for me. And that's fine. So it doesn't mean that if you are somebody like that, that you now need to go and be the soul of the party. But what this thing means is that we need people to live, isn't it? We're not living in a tribal community 5,000 years ago in the Amazon forest. Even that they had a tribe. Because we need to call on people, we need people's care and love and resource and advice too until we die. So how do you associate with people? Because you see, some people say, my friends are insincere, they're backstabbers. Why is it that they're all backstabbers? Now, if everybody's a backstabber, there's a problem here, no? Because the world is not full of backstabbers, there are sincere good people. So why is it that you couldn't attract these backstabbers? They're good people. Is it because your way of analyzing people, your judgment is wrong all the time and that you attract these people? No. Is it that you're not as sincere and authentic? Because what I have seen personally, as well as through research readings and through with other people, is that your mind, we are all energy sources, our thoughts are energy. We attract people to us based on the way we look at the world, think about the world, and thoughts we generate. So if the thoughts you generate are full of manipulation, greed, insincerity, manipulations, all that, you will attract people of similar mind. Or even if you attract sincere people who's willing to be your friend in a sincere way, they get repelled off you because they see this nature in you. So therefore, one of the biggest protectors of your mind is having fantastic connections. But in order to get there, you need to have your humaneness sorted out. For example, are you tolerant of others? Or are you a person at the slightest flaw in somebody, you are just ready to dump that person? There are people like that. A friend didn't talk to you nicely at last week's dinner, I don't want to talk to that person. Or you're organizing a get-together and one friend says they can't come, you dump that person. Ultimately, who's really at fault? It's because of your lacks that you can't attract and keep long-term friendship. How long is your longest friendship? Is it 2 years from your newest office? Or there are people who say, like I had an aunt of mine, she's 86, and her longest friendships is about 60 years ago, which are friends from her university time. There are people whose longest friendships are people who were at school. My longest friendship would be from grade 4 when I was 10 years, my school friend, my best friend at that time. So what does it say about you? If you have long-term friendship, it says that you can tolerate another person's weaknesses. You're patient at another person's weaknesses. You're able to compromise. You're able to be giving to others. And because you have these qualities, you attract people who also are tolerant of you. So therefore, being connected, it's a protector of your mind, but in order to be connected, you need to get your act together. And it's not only with friends, but also acquaintances. Acquaintances bring a lot to our life. Like, for example, the security guard in the organization, or the man who waits in the corner shop that you buy your groceries from. Or if you go to Green Cabin, the girl who serves you, you don't know her name, you don't know where she comes from, but you've bonded so much, are you connected? Like, for example, during the pandemic, I go to Coco Verand and I buy the iced coffee. It's fantastic, best. And when I want to, now you can't order it easily. Sometimes Uber isn't working. So I called them, and now they have my number saved, and they know exactly what I want, and they are willing to come and even deliver it to my place. And that's what you call acquaintances, because I really don't even know the names of the people who are serving at Coco Veranda. They don't know my name, because half the time you're on with the mask on, but that connection makes life easy for us. I'll give you a nice example story I read at the Reader's Digest. It said of a woman, it's a true story, who used to say good morning and good evening when she entered and left the house, or left the office building, it's a multiplex building, to the security. Security didn't know who she was, knew which company in which building, which floor, but didn't really know who she was, and she didn't know him. And one Friday evening, the security guard was just sitting and waiting, and how the other officers were closed. It was a weekend coming. Suddenly it occurred to him that this lady who says good evening or good night to him didn't go out, but she came in the morning. So he thought that's a bit odd, because she was a friendly lady and a very kind woman. Then he looked to see that she hadn't signed out. So then he thought that she was working late. No, hours ticked by and nothing. He thought, did something happen to her? So what had happened was, this lady had gotten the lift after working few late hours, and the lift had got stuck. So she was stuck in the lift, and she knew that a weekend was coming. She was, I think, living by herself or whatever in a foreign country, and people will only find her on the Monday when they come back to work, and she's probably dead, no oxygen. But this security officer, because she was so kind to him, by just saying good evening and good morning, went in search of her, found this situation with the lift, and of course, rest is history, she was saved. So that doesn't mean that we go and say hi to every security guard and the bus driver and the bus conductor like that in a very user-based mentality. But what this shows is about our humanness connecting with others, which then benefits our life and our mental health. Then we have spirituality as a mental health strategy. Now, not all of us may be inclined towards religious practice or spirituality, or we may be having our own individual practice, which is perfectly fine. So it doesn't mean that I'm encouraging, or psychologists are encouraging all of us to now make the beeline or the biggest rush to the temple church, the COVID, or the mosque, or the synagogue. No, but just for you to consider connecting with your religious teachings, whatever it may be, in times when life is particularly challenging, or even in other times. Because what psychology says, and we know through our own personal experience, is that our religious teachings broadens our horizons about what life is. Broadens it from our own very limited human perspective. You see, I'll give you a little very sweet story. A teacher was telling me that she was having significant problems with her husband, and she teaches his 8-year-old children in school. So she goes to school very sad. So one day, this 8-year-old child had come and asked her, teacher, how are you you look very sad. Why is that? So this teacher was really shocked that this 8-year-old was so observant, and said, "Hey, Baba, I'm a teacher looking you look very sad." Then this child didn't press the teacher to find out what was wrong. She asked the teacher, why get the Buddha Pilamaya Pahan Tira Tel? Do you have Buddha statue, Pahanak, and all that? She said, yes. She says, teacher, Hamadana, when you get up in the morning, first thing, and then before you go to sleep, the last thing, you take that lamp, you put some oil, put a wick, light it, and say, I just want to be happy. I want my day to go well. I want my night to go well. I want things to be fine for me. I just want to be happy. So this little girl didn't say high-flown theoretical stuff like the Dukkata, Nirogvata, Sopatita, as somebody would. And you can do that, certainly. But she said something close to the heart, very human, very authentic, very genuine. This teacher was really shocked. And she thought, whatever it is, I'll do it, just as a gratitude for this little girl. So that night, she had done just that, just lit the lamp and said these things. And she felt, she said, this sense of like a calmness, like things are going to be okay. And she continued the practice, and she still continued the practice to this date. And she said that kind of grounding, the kind of calmness that washes over you, the very simple spiritual practice can be very profound. So therefore, I invite you to visit, maybe reading a bit of the Bible, the Quran, the Bhagavad Gita, the Dhammapada. It doesn't have to go to high flown levels, like you won't rush and get the next Abhidhamma book if you're a Buddhist, when you haven't even read the Dhammapada. Start afresh, start new, and then get to the crux of the teachings. It could give you insights and perspectives that could broaden your horizons and uplift your mental well-being. But the ninth strategy I want to talk to you about is humor. Now, humor is the greatest softener of the mind, and Sri Lankans are aces at being humorous. The biggest calamity can hit us, and immediately there's a meme coming. You might remember, this came to my mind when they were doing this jogging track for Polonnaruwa. I think it was like we got to know in the morning, and in the afternoon there were these jokes of King Parakrama Bahu, who has that oracle leaf, but actually Puskola Potabari Puksaka, people call it the pepper, running around the Parakrama Samudra in Polonnaruwa on the so-called track. So that's what Sri Lankans are about, isn't it? So humor is a fantastic softener of the mind. Now, when we talk about humor, we're not talking about humiliating others. Now, that also Sri Lankans are fantastic at. Now, a girl goes on the road, the guys will be cat whistling, saying hello, 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 going near and telling some foul things to her ears and laughing. We're not talking about that kind of unwholesome humor. We're talking about wholesome humor. That means the kind of entertainment that you get involved in. If you're in a particularly unhappy state of mind, do you go and listen to further depressing music? Do you listen to mood-lowering books or TV shows or movies? I'm amazed at the number of people who, when they're unhappy, switch on and watch even more unhappy movies. Or they listen to even worse songs of like relationship breakdown. As it is, their relationship had got broken down, and then they listen to some other relationship breakdown songs, and they're crying away and eating soil and all that stuff. It's not going to help your mind. You see, I had a friend of mine who had a relationship breakdown. She was devastated. Then we had to go to Kurunegala. I was driving, and she got in the car and she gave me a pen drive and said, Pianjali, I don't want to listen to the kind of songs that you listen. They're far too happy. I want to listen to this set. They're specially compiled for myself. I said, well, why is it specially compiled? She said, they're all unhappy, sad songs on love affairs. And that's why I can cry and cry and cry. So why would you want to do that? If you're unhappy, we need to have strategies to get out of it, not to sink further into it, like quicksand. So we see this happening. If you look at teledramas in our country or some certain movies, it's all about backstabbing, gossiping, acid throwing, fighting, all sorts of negative things, and you come out of it reeling with shock. So make sure that if you are going through a difficult patch in life, whether it's anger, irritability, jealousy, unhappiness, sadness, depression, choose your entertainment wisely. Don't blindly go into teledramas or Netflix or choosing movies or music that will further activate your mind to make it worse. Choose wisely. Things that are light, things that are joyous, things that uplift you, things that gives you hope, that things wonder in you. And also try to hang around with friends who bring lightness to life. Not the gloom and doom variety who said, oh my God. It's like, during the pandemic, there were these gloom and doom types who, I don't want to listen to those types because they are just as if the entire planet Earth is going to break into two kind of thing and it's only a virus. So make sure that the company you keep is also healthy and humorous. Now, Rukshila, I'm much aware that at 5:15, I have about 3 strategies, but we can always share these strategies as PowerPoint slides with others and open time for questions, Rukshila, because we only have 15 more minutes. What would you like to do, Dilan and Rukshila?
I think, Professor, we have 2 more strategies, is it?
3 strategies.
3 strategies.
Explain them. Self-explanatory if you want it, because they're not as significant as the others.
Okay, I think we can walk through those as well.
Okay. So the 10th strategy, the 10th strategy is actually maintaining a daily schedule. Now, during the pandemic, your lifestyle would have gone quite haywire, or the job that you're in, being in IT, especially if you're liaising with other countries, you may be anyway having rather a chaotic schedule, which other people in the country or in your family may not be going through. Of course, job-wise, you might need to adapt to it, especially as you go up the ladder. However, being also acutely aware that having a structure in life is important. Otherwise, life becomes very chaotic. That's why children have timetables in schools. So your waking up time, your sleeping time, the quality of food that you eat, not to vary it too much. So sometimes, pre-pandemic, you may have eaten quite healthy brown rice, fruits, veggies, a good piece of fish. But as the pandemic set in, you were more into fried stuff, sugary stuff. You would have exercised before, but now you didn't. Though you could have easily got exercise clips from YouTube or done more vigorous household work, you didn't. If you had slept at 10 o'clock in the night, now you're sleeping at 2 o'clock in the morning, getting up pretty late and groggy. Having no schedule doesn't mean that you have to be a slave and say, I have to sleep at 10 o'clock, even if there are guests, out you go, because bedtime is at 10. Not like that, but having a bit of a structured time that you kind of keep to is very useful for your mental health and, of course, your physical health. Then exposure to media, especially the COVID times, some people just get up with the news and go to sleep with the news. It's just news. I have an aunt of mine, you go to a house, you only hear COVID, coronavirus, Wuhan, death rates, rapid antigen tests, PCR, those are the keywords in that household. And it's really annoying. And most of the data she gives is all incorrect. So she gets it from various WhatsApp forwards, Facebook postings of unknown people, unknown origin. So make sure that you listen to one news channel if you want to, and kindly do not be so enmeshed in social media stuff like this picture I have put for you. People post all sorts of things which is so untrue. If you really want information about the pandemic and what the world is happening, Ministry of Health, Sri Lanka's Epidemiology Unit, Sri Lanka Medical Association, World Health Organization, and prevent yourself from doing forwards of this information to others as well without checking the validity of these claims. Finally, box breathing is a technique of reducing your anxiety and panic when you feel like this. Some people, when they get up in the morning, they feel very anxious because of the life situations we find ourselves in. There are physiological ways of minimizing our anxiety really by our breathing styles. So there's a technique called box breathing, where you breathe in for 4 counts, hold for 4 counts, breathe out for 4 counts, and hold for 4 counts, and you go on like that. So it's not like 1, 2, 3, 4, because then you probably suffocate, and you don't do 1, 2, 3, 4, because then you will have no oxygen. It's more like you breathe in 1, 2, 3, 4, hold the breath 1, 2, 3, 4, let go 1, 2, 3. It's like a box of 4 beats. That kind of changes your physiology and the functioning of your body biologically, which then has an impact on your mind, which will reduce your anxiety if you practice this when you're feeling particularly anxious. Then finally, I've given to you, if you feel that you need more mental health support, certainly reach out for it. It's for yourself. You're the most important person in your life. It's important to look after yourself. Government and private services offer, government hospitals, private hospitals offer psychology, counseling, psychiatric services. Then there are a whole range of hotlines, free hotlines like NIMH, National Mental Health. Then there are non-governmental organizations like Women in Need for gender-based violence, particularly violence against women, if you are victimized by it. Then Sumitra and CCC are mental health hotlines that you can call on to. And finally, National Child Protection Authority for child-related mental health and child abuse issues. So today I discussed with you about mental health and what indicators of mental health are. And then I gave you, I think, about 12 strategies of what you can do to include in your life so that your mental health, your well-being, your happiness and productivity would be upped, pandemic or no pandemic. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Priyanjali, for taking us through these 12 strategies of how to work on and to stay consciously mentally healthy, because our individual mental health benefits not only us, but it also benefits our families, our colleagues, and everyone around us. So now we'll be moving on to the Q&A session. So we have received a few questions as well. In the meantime, if anyone would like to unmute and speak, you can let us know and we can do so. Or you could post your questions on Slido. This is an anonymous platform, so we won't be informing your name. So you could just put in your questions. So let me go to the first question, or one of the questions which we have received. Okay, right, Professor, there is a question. How do we get away from procrastination? It would be great if you could say a few words about this.
I think the fact that you know that you procrastinate itself is a big thing, isn't it? Because some people don't even know they procrastinate. I think really procrastination could be done. So first, knowing you do it is the fantastic. It's like 50% of the job done. Second is what I would suggest is you do it in, like say if you have to finish writing a book, like I say writing a book because I'm an academic and that's what we procrastinate about, or cleaning a cupboard or painting a part of your house, do it, try to see whether you can do it in shorter chunks, not the whole thing. Because some people think in one shot I have to finish, and that's going to blow your mind off. So instead, you would think, well, you know what, I'll work for 1 hour today from 9 to 10. Or I will write this number of pages, and that's it. And then link it with a reward for yourself. That's how I do. So for example, I think if I have to work on a weekend, I think I'll work for 4 hours. So I'm going to work from say 10 to 2. Then I'm going to go out. I'm going to go for a drive. I'm going to go and have something nice to eat. So because I look forward to it, and also I have set a time that is manageable for me, rather than just like going crazy and working 12 hours. That's going to put you off this whole thing. So therefore, how would you procrastinate? First, knowing that you procrastinate. Second is break the job down into smaller, manageable chunks. And then reward yourself for whatever you do so that you keep going like that. So that will be one way.
Thank you, Professor. I hope that question was answered. Right. Okay, we have another question. Lack of interaction with co-workers can make team building difficult while working from home. How can we overcome this?
Yeah, that is there. Like I mean, it's a given, isn't it? So you can't have the ideal situation because we do have a pandemic. It's like the person I told you who was cheesed off with the virus and very angry, and the entire psychotherapy session is that, and this person was then cheesed off with a company because that person worked in an IT company, and because he couldn't connect with the co-workers. Now, that is an issue, but that is an issue that arises from the challenging situation we find ourselves in. So within that context, what can you do? Well, I suppose it's a limitation that life has given us. So within that, we need to think of solutions. Could be calling somebody, having a WhatsApp group, or a virtual meal thing, virtual coffee day, things like that. So you just try to, it's like somebody who's going through a surgery for the leg. You can't walk after that for a few months, but you can use crutches and you can get about slowly. difficult. You can't wear the fancy clothes, but you can still walk, right? So rather than thinking, oh, I can't do this, or this is really inconvenient, put your mind to what can I do? Change the question you're asking, and then you might have some options and do those rather than doing nothing. Rukshila.
Okay, we have a few more questions coming in. Okay, how to deal with a difficult co-worker who always tries to create trouble within the team?
Now that's a difficult question to answer, Rukshila, because you don't know what kind of trouble that co-worker makes and whether the person who is asking this question also has certain issues. We don't know, isn't it? Because these are individual questions, individual personality dynamics, which has to be really looked into for the sake of the dynamic, which we don't have that information on. So I won't be, it won't be right if I say do this, because it will be totally irrelevant to this question. So I'll pass that.
It's more of an individual question, I think.
Yeah.
Right. Okay, we have a few more minutes. Okay, we have another one. How to cope with distractions while working from home, especially like checking social media, going to Facebook, that type of social media.
I think that's a tough one, because I think I told you that I deactivated my Facebook account because of that. It's a drastic decisions, but what I did was, because I practice present moment awareness as part of my lifestyle, what happens is when you start living in the present moment, every time your mind wanders away from the key task you're doing, so your mind might be wandering to say Facebook or YouTube, you will see that the mind, so you carry your mind with you while now doing Facebook, when you actually should be doing something else. But your mind is now very much with you on this Facebook activity or scrolling you're doing. When you keep on doing like that, because you're in the present moment, not distractedly doing it, your mind itself starts realizing this is really worthless. Spending hours on Facebook, unnecessary things. I'm not learning anything. I'm just comparing myself with the other person who's posted on the Facebook, that kind of stuff. Your mind starts rejecting that kind of excessive activity, Rukshila. So therefore, the ultimate strategy to overcome excessive use of social media, because social media has its benefits also, it's not a no 100%, is to, if you really can't peel yourself out of it with your sheer willpower, do it with mindfulness. Do it very much in the present with it rather than absent-mindedly. And as you do that, your mind itself is thinking this is really nothing, such nothing much, and it will on its own reject itself. Is that clear?
Yes, Priyanshu, that's clear. Okay, we can go to one more question. It's actually two questions in one. How can we assess the well-being of employees who work from home? Are there any tips to focus improvement?
I think, it's
how
not
can
easy
we
to
assess the well-being of employees who work from home? Are there
assessment, you can check whether somebody is dysfunctional. The very crude measurement for a non-mental health person to do that would be to see the change they have made from the baseline. So for example, if you had known the person before this whole pandemic thing, before home working context, and now they show some weird behaviors like temper tantrums, moodiness, grumpiness kind of thing, which is quite different to the person you knew beforehand, you can come to the conclusion that they may be going through some difficulty. So that may be like a good measurement, but really doing an in-depth assessment, first of all, you need to find out whether you need to do that. And then for that, you need to have more skills, Rukshila. But a crude way is simply to see what are the changes a person is showing now. Because sometimes you say, then something is afoot with that person. That could be one way.
Okay. I hope that answer helped the audience as well. Okay, so it's 5:30. We'll go to our final question, which we have got through our chat.
Chat, yeah.
How could we be more empathetic in our interactions, conversations, especially in remote communications via chat or emails? Also, how important we should consider emotions while communicating during meetings, etc. We don't see faces anymore in meetings during this time.
I mean, I'm glad that person asked this question, because clearly that person values the importance of empathy, isn't it? That is why you asked that question. Some people don't think of it like that. So that's really good. Congratulations that you even thought of that dimension. I think I personally, when I write an email at a point when I'm quite emotionally agitated, I read it about 2 or 3 times and I try to soften it. There are ways to soften it. For example, rather than saying, "Why do you say that?" and writing it, you can say, "What makes you say that?" You know, it's the same question, but the tone is different. Why don't you do it? You can say, "Would it be possible for you to do it?" So it's the same thing, but you're gentilizing it. If there's a word like that. That comes across as being more empathic. Now, there are many reasons why we don't write such empathic emails, because why? We are in throes of our anger, and therefore we just write what we want, and then we press the send button. Or we think that if you make it gentle, they think that we are weak, that we are fools. I have to show them that I'm strong. I'm going to write it like that. But then the repercussions are more significantly bad for you. So read your emails twice or thrice. Think about making those sentences gentle. So rather than as if they're like daggers coming, why do you say that? You could say, "What makes you say that?" It's the same question, but said it in a different way, in a gentle way. So that's one way. Then, of course, emotions are very important. You don't have to see somebody's face, but you can sense it from their tone, isn't it? Or even if it's, if the video is on, you can see who is who. We can sense it by somebody's tone of voice, the choice of words, what that person's emotional tone is. You don't have to be a psychologist to have that skill. Any person, after we have lived an X number of years on planet Earth and having human interactions, we know when somebody's not nice to us by the tone of the voice. So in order to rectify that, we have to make our heart nicer. How much can you pretend to be nice by changing the tone of your voice? There are people like that who tell us the most beautiful things. "Oh, you look so lovely, you're so nice, you're so kind, you're so educated." But we get the gut feeling that this person is not sincere to me. Then therefore, it is not just how you conduct on the surface with these interactions, but you as a person has to change. So whether you're on audiovisual or Zoom or in person, you come out as a really nice person, because why? Your core is nice, and therefore your talking style will also be nice. Rukshila.
Yes, we've been getting many more questions, Professor, but since we're running out of time, and some of the questions are quite individual questions, so yeah, we can't answer some of them on this webinar. So let's move on to our next section, which is we're almost in time to wrap up the webinar. But before that, we would like to know the audience feedback on this session. So a link has been shared with you on the chat. It would take less than 30 seconds. You could just go to the polls section in this Slido link and rate our session. So this brings us to wrap off today's webinar. I would like to thank you, our speaker, Professor Pianjali de Soisa, for obliging to our request and joining us this evening to enlighten us on how to stay mentally healthy and how to cope with the challenges of returning to the office environment. Thank you, Professor. Special thanks to SLASCOM, the strategic partner of this session, and also everyone from Vital Hub who helped organize this webinar. Last but not least, thank you to our audience for joining us this evening. We hope that you are empowered to discover your happiness through mental well-being. Stay safe, thank you, and take care.